So welcome to this podcast with me, Chris Jones, founder of Twisted50. I can't believe we just pressed the upload button and the book is now on Amazon, awaiting approval from the Amazon people. We have a sneaky that it's going to get rejected first time round because of ISBN numbers and incompatibilities. It's all the stuff authors never hear about when they publish their own books or get their books published, because we've spent the whole day banging our heads against computers to get them to do the things we need them to do to meet the very, very strict guidelines for uploading documents to Amazon. Bottom line, Twisted50 Volume 3 is effectively completed. We are knocking back the glasses of, mugs, shall we say, of coffee. We don't have the budget for champagne, but still you get the picture. With me is Kate, who's effectively been the editor of Twisted50. Kate, how do you feel?
Great, fantastic, very, very pleased that we actually managed to do it in this time frame. I wasn't sure we'd be able to complete everything, so this is fantastic.
I agree. I was a little bit nervous we weren't going to make it in time, because we did set a published date, which is usually a bit silly to do because you have to meet it. Okay, so this podcast is a kind of look back at the whole Twisted50 process and the lessons we've learned. Effectively, you know, if we run it again, which sneaky we will, like all good horror movies, this is the final chapter, part 3, but we're already planning chapter 4, Back from the Dead. So it's only appropriate. So effectively, if we do run chapter 4, book 4, I guess this podcast is what we've learned from the last book about the best ways to make sure that you can get yourself into book number 4. So Kate, you joined us, it feels like 2.5 centuries ago, but it was probably like 7 or 8 weeks. How did you come to us?
Well, for starters, I basically came here as a work placement for my university, London Film Academy, but I've been doing writing since I was a little kid. I've been doing NaNoWriMo, which is National Novel Writing Month, for probably 8 years now, and I've wanted to be an author since I was 6. So I'd like to give myself more of the credit, but half of it does entirely go to my school. And yeah, I originally came and it was under the impression of only doing a work placement for London Screenwriters Festival, but it actually turned out to be a work placement just with Chris and everything that he runs, everything you run. So yes, yeah.
It's been an adventure.
Yeah.
So when you came in for an interview, you already had an amazing resume because you'd won NaNoWriMo multiple times, which told me that, you know, you had staying power, because you have to have staying power to get to the finish line of NaNoWriMo. But also you were really, really, really into writing. And that came through in the interview, which was profoundly enthusiastic, so which I fully endorse. And we talked about Twisted50 in the interview, and at that moment I think, you know, you didn't quite know what it was. What it turned into was effectively reading, feeding back and doing some editing and grammar checking on something like 170 horror stories. What was it like reading that many horror stories, and how has it impacted your writing?
Horrifying. It was very interesting because I think everybody has very different writing styles, and I think that it improved a lot in my writing just from the amount of it that I read. No matter what, you always end up learning. Even if you're reading something that isn't your style of writing, you're still processing different approaches to sentence structure and grammar and everything like that. So I think it's been fantastic. I think I've learned a lot. I also learned a lot of kind of what I prefer, or what is easiest to read when you need to read a big amount of things in a small period of time, which I think is really beneficial in terms of learning how to write if you ever want to be published, not self-published, but go to a publisher or do anything that just kind of needs other people to read your writing in a short time frame.
Right. So, but that extends to readers now, because like Netflix, if you have the Kindle Unlimited account, you on page 3, if you're not digging it, you just go, okay, I'll return it and I'll get another book.
Yeah.
So it really is an exercise in writing for the reader, writing for the audience, and that comes through almost from word number 1.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. 100%. My favorite thing is when I'd open up a story and it would be like so many spaces with the sentences. Like, it wouldn't be these thick paragraphs. It'd be like 2 sentences and then enter and then a few more sentences, because it just made it so much easier to read and process. And I really understood kind of the respect that you have to give to the reader, which I feel like I hadn't really before.
Right. So if you could kind of isolate any patterns that you saw repeatedly in and give writers submitting to Twisted4 some heads up about things that makes something jump out for you when you're reading it. And just to be clear, you're not the only person who's read all the stories. We had a very large group of readers, and we're also going out to judges soon for the best stories and from shortlists. And it also has to be noted that sometimes you would rate a story like 4 out of 10, and then another reader might give it 10 out of 10.
Yeah.
And that did happen. So there is definitely taste and theme, and whatever it is, it resonates with one person but not another person. But then maybe just on a basic craft level, what is it, do you think, that you would say, if you were writing for Twisted Volume 4, how would you approach it, and what traps would you not fall into yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I think I discussed this very lightly in one of the blog posts I made, like about a week in, which is very interesting because I think it stayed very relevant. I don't think it changed at all in the way of always, like, the simpler the better. It's really nice to have, like, fancy and complicated sentences and, very pretty descriptions. And I think it is nice when you have that, but in moderation. Something that happens when you have a lot of really long sentences all put together is it gets jumbled and you don't really process anything. So something I think is super important that I definitely am going to utilize in my writing in the future, and that I think is necessary for anyone who wants to write for Twisted50, is just making sure that your writing is concise. You can still, have colorful descriptions and everything like that, but it's important to make sure you also keep it something that's palatable. And then another thing I also think is having opinions in your writing is so nice. When you have like a protagonist that actually has an opinion on things, or when even just as a narrator you take a stance on how you're describing things, it just makes it a lot more engaging. And I care a lot more about the protagonist when I feel like they have a more set personality. I'm like, okay, like, so this is, kind of what they like, and this is what they don't like, and this is a situation, and that's a weird way to respond. And those are all things that I think really flesh out the characters, and make it stand out a lot more. I'd say those are 2 probably quite important parts.
Right. And, I mean, obviously on a technical level, there's things like typos, grammar.
Yes, yeah, that's super important. That's very, very important. Please, grammar. It matters a lot, because I have to go through and, like, edit all of the grammar things just to adjust it to our house style. But a lot of it oftentimes can be just, like, typical grammar that, like, is forgotten or something like that. And it also kind of harms the reading process because it flows less. I'm going to notice, oh, wow, that's weird. They didn't use any quotation marks. Or, wow, there isn't, like, a period for 2 paragraphs. And just, basic stuff like that I think is quite important, and you need to recognize and really make sure that you are utilizing it. Yeah.
I'm gonna throw in my own personal thing now about indents and tabs. Please don't use them ever, because it's easy for us to put them in if we want to, but I can't tell you how many times we've had to remove them, and it just is a pain in the neck. So really, when you're submitting, it should really be text, paragraph returns, bold and italic, and bold and italic really need to be earned. You know, and I'm sure, you know, you were talking about the flowery language and you know, the 80-20 principle. It just really struck me that you kind of need to earn the right to have that one passage, that one line that is being a little bit more indulgent by the other 80% of the story being more efficient, and so that when you get to it, it's a treat, as opposed, it's a bit like if everything is dessert, it becomes, you know, it becomes nauseating ultimately, because everything is so sweet. And I don't mean necessarily sweet, but I mean like it hits the palate in a certain way that is quite extreme, and if it's all too extreme, it becomes unpalatable. And you know, allied to you know, the taking out the tabs and stuff, another personal thing for me is to remember that, you know, there's usually a team of people, and by a team of people I mean me and Kate at the moment,
for real.
Who are, you know, working hard to make everybody look good and sound good and be well presented, and to be really mindful of that. And when we ask for things like headshots and bios, you know, please make it a priority. It's funnily enough, we just got a blog post that literally has made it into the book with like 15 minutes to spare, and the title of his blog post is "I don't have time to write," and he still made time and got it in there. But you do have time. Like, you have time to do all of these things. You're just choosing other things which are of a greater priority to you in that moment, and that's entirely your choice. But it just makes our lives a little bit more challenging. And there is definitely in the selection process, you know, I've been very upfront about this in the whole of Create50, is we're not just looking for the best work, but we're looking for the best work from the most engaged authors, because the most engaged authors are going to go on Facebook, are going to go on X or Instagram and promote the book when it comes out. And that's the whole point of the book, is it's a launch pad for 50 writers. And if 50 writers are all promoting, then that's 50 times more eyeballs on it. And if we're in a toss-up between a writer who is disengaged and a writer who's highly engaged, we will always choose the highly engaged writer. Always, always, always. This should not be a surprise or a shock to anybody. And that comes down to things like when I've been asking for people to write blog posts. All of that really helps in the promotion of the book. So it really, Create50 and Twisted50 in this instance, it's always been a kind of like living laboratory of how to be successful in the creative industries. And it's not just about creating the thing. Like, the story is a thing, but then there's the stuff around it, the headshot, the bio, the blog posts, the engagement, the sharing on social medias. All of that stuff really is part of how to be creatively successful. Kate, I can see you twitching.
No, yeah, I just want to add something to that and say that even when we did have some writers who were fantastic and super engaged in the community and fantastic in that, another factor that did contribute to what stories we chose was how many like stories we had that fit into that same genre or had that same category. So even if you are a very active participant on Create50 and Twisted50, and you're, you know, being a fantastic person for feedback and writing all these blogs and everything, you are someone we would 100% choose. But if we didn't end up getting to, it was only because of external reasons.
Sure. I mean, we have to remember we're building a book, and the book by definition isn't the 50 best stories, but it's the 50 stories that make a book. So, you know, I know Kendall Castor-Perry has submitted a story about, I think it's a killer toaster, but if there was another story about a killer toaster, you know, we'd have to choose. We can't put 2 killer toasters in the book. And it's the same if we've got too many vampires, too many werewolves, too many zombies, then we need to make an adjustment for that. And it is a frustration. It's a frustration for us, and it's a frustration for the writers too. Another really simple tip that I would offer, and we've put this in the rules before, we never really enforce it, but again, it just makes our lives super easy, is know what your name is and communicate with us in your name, as in the author's name. Your real name, we don't want to know what your real name is. Yes, you might have to sign the contract in your real name, but please communicate with us in your author's name, because it's a bit like that famous quote, you know, a person with a watch knows the time, a person with two watches never really knows the time. And it's the same with authors who have a pen name. So if we're not quite sure, like even this afternoon we had a moment like, have we put the same author in twice because we've got two different names for them? It turned out we hadn't. But we spent 20 minutes messing around on that.
And we did make that mistake before.
Exactly.
With another person who, it was like literally the same name. It was just, her first name was like abbreviated in one. And she had her middle initials. And we were like, oh no.
I know.
Yeah.
So, you know, that's just another little tip from us is just to make our lives easy. And I know, you know, it may be easy to go, well, you know, it's a system, it should all work. But that's how you fall between the cracks. It is if something's not making sense, often there isn't time to kind of go and spend half an hour trying to figure it out. So anyway, in terms of, like, we've been ducking and diving as well. Like we invented a whole screenwriting aspect to it.
Yeah.
And that came out of just a conversation with a writer. What have you learned from reading all the scripts that were submitted?
So much. So much. I mean, once again, I think it's actually quite similar to a lot of what I said for Twisted50, is like, keep it simple. The one thing about scripts, actually, that I think is really important is that it's not novel writing. And you need to recognize that, because every single piece of page you have is super important. So you want to get across what's happening immediately, get it across really fast, easy to read, something you can process in a very, like, snappy way. Because oftentimes I would open up a script and it would be these huge, thick paragraphs, and I just can't read it like that. Like, it's an exhausting read versus stuff where people would have, like, you know, 4 paragraphs or less of description, and then they'd, like, do enter or anything like that. Is it felt a lot more lively and a lot easier to process. I also think something that really matters is dialogue, and knowing whether the dialogue feels natural or not. Like, try actually saying it before you solidify it, because a lot of the times it can feel natural when you, like, write it down, but then when you actually read it out loud, it'll feel really weird in your mouth, and because it's just not, like, how people actually speak, and it can really impact the process, especially as a script, because it's meant to be read out loud. It's not really meant to be read in your head.
Yeah.
And
you know, the community around Twisted50, it's always been the same with Create 50 projects. There's usually a handful of really super engaged people, and they're always the superstars of the whole project.
Yeah.
And, you know, we're always rooting for their stories. One person this year, Rusty from the United States of America, has been really super engaged and gone off and made audio drama versions of other people's stories and written blog posts. And I just wanted to give him a really big shout out, because, you know, he really kind of epitomizes the spirit of what Create 50 and Twisted 50 really is, which is enjoying the process of creating and then engaging and immersing yourself in the process of putting it out in the world, which is at one end just sharing it on the internet, and at the other end is trying to, you know, get it out on Amazon, and then following up with marketing and see if we can get in newspapers, on the radio. This is all to come, but it's that next big phase of the project, which is marketing and platforming the individual writers so that they can, you know, have something on their resume that helps them get paid work in the future. What was engaging with the community like for you, Kate?
Oh, it was awesome. Everyone was so nice and very, very kind. I had a few email issues that were no one's fault. Like, my email would just, like, bounce, and for some reason I had to, like, switch emails to contact people. But everyone was so lovely to speak with, and very, very kind, and clearly doing this out of something of passion, and I think that really comes through. I think that's very, very evident. Yeah, no, it was wonderful.
I think it's a really interesting point you raise about the emails, because when I train, we're doing a talent campus in the next couple of weeks, which is professional development for screenwriters. But one of the fundamentals is to not just make the assumption. And if we haven't responded to you, it's almost certainly because our email's gone to spam. It's not because we're ignoring you or not coming back to you. So you can always follow up with a polite, very, very short message. Hey, did you get the last message? Here it is if you didn't get it. It's always about helping us action the challenge that lies ahead of us, because you as a writer are dealing with us as the people organising it. We as the people organising it are dealing with 170 writers, and it's a whole different creature. We want to do the very best we can for everybody. So always try and make communications with us as simple and clear as you possibly can, and don't assume that if we don't respond, we'll respond. We always respond to everything. So have you got any other thoughts, Kate, before we kind of bring this to a conclusion?
I'm trying to think off the tip of my tongue. I don't really think so. I don't think so. I think there were a lot of creative stories this round. I'm very excited to see what other stories come through, and I think it'll be very fascinating to see who applies again. I think that's what's really cool, is when you see people that have done it for more than 1 year.
Yeah.
That's really neat.
Yeah. And on that point, we have seen people who've submitted and gone through the process through Twisted 1 to Ghosts of Christmas, and have finally made it into Twisted 3. And again, that's the heart of what we're doing, which is flexing the muscle, improving, offering feedback, learning through offering feedback, doing rewrites, seeing how that lands with other readers. I think in the next version, we're going to expand it to maybe 3 or 4 reads per submission, so that everybody's getting much more feedback on their stories. And again, you'll probably pick this up. Enter early as you can, because the earlier you enter, the more likely it is you're going to get lots and lots of feedback. So if you're listening to this, get writing, because Twisted 4 is coming at some point in 2025, and she'll be back from the dead. So if Kate, let me ask you this, from our perspective and perhaps the writer's perspective, if we were going to do it again, which we are, how would you do it differently? What do you think we can do to make everything better, or some part of it better?
Ooh, that's a really good question. I think something... Oh, that's a great question. Give me 1 second. I
mean, there may not be an answer. And that's not to kind of say, oh, we're so brilliant, we got it right. It just, I would love to... find 20 grand from somewhere to redevelop the website so that we could automate a lot of the process, because it's all hand uploaded.
Yeah.
It's done by human. There is no automatic system behind it. So that would be awesome.
Yeah, I think that's actually huge to emphasize. It's everything you think is automatic is not. It's all manual, and it's usually all done by me and Chris. And me and Chris, so it's a lot of by hand stuff, uploading bios and all of that. None of that feeds into an actual system. That's us individually going through and feeding it into the website. So I mean, I think what Chris was saying about just doing stuff on time, doing it early is fantastic, because I have to go download a form every time I want to check the bios. Right? So the less times I have to download the form, the easier it is, and the more likely you are to show up on the website. So just stuff like that.
Yeah. And again, I would love this all to be automated, but those cool websites that we see on the internet, there's usually, just to give you an idea, when we speak to programmers, the good people that, who we'd really love, they're on, 350 to 500 an hour. So, no. Yeah. That's not going to be happening. And yes, they could probably build it in 2 days, but it would still cost us 10 grand, 15 grand, and we just don't have those kind of resources. If you were talking to writers who are going to submit to the 4th book, what advice would you offer them?
Ooh, I mean, I think one of the main ones, and I think it kind of comes with the whole concept, but get creative. I mean, the ones that, like, really ended up in the story, or at least a few, I was like, they really stood out to me because they were very unique concepts. For example, the toaster one. Very interesting. I was like, I don't think I would have ever thought of, like, having an entire story be from someone who gets, like, put in an inanimate object. You know, like, all these very interesting concepts. But really get creative. There was one that called The Gangling Man by Deborah Fisher, and she wrote it almost like it's this, like, it feels like it's probably this, like, Cockney boy, like, telling, like, a group of people around a campfire, like, and it's written like that. It has a very unique, like, dialogue and inflection. So I think just anything where you really don't be afraid to get really weird. Don't be afraid to get really, really weird. That's kind of where you kind of sparkle a little bit, because it makes it stand out, and it makes us, you know, see something new, and we're like, oh my god, did you read the one about the rooster? And you're like, the rooster, well, rooster, you know?
Yeah. And Rooster was, you know, it's a really, by Simon Richardson, is a really good example of, you really wanted to put it in as the first story in the book. And my take was, it's just a little bit too far out for the first story. So people who don't know anything about the project, they're going to read this first story and go, okay, that's, like, out there. So we went with something a little bit more traditional for the first story, which is Werewolf.
Which I love.
Yeah. So Rooster's coming in, I don't know, number 8 in the, and this may change. There's a lot of things, there's a lot of moving parts at the moment. Even though we have uploaded it and it's on Amazon, I guarantee I'll be re-uploading later tonight after they come back to tell us that there's some issues with the files that we've uploaded. Okay, so any final thoughts then, Kate, as we draw this to a conclusion about the experience and you know, what we could, how we might improve it?
I think just, like, be as engaging as you can, have fun. Like, the point of this is to have fun. It's an initiative for writing, and if it's not something you're enjoying, I can tell, and we can tell, and then it's just not fun for anyone. So it's really nice when you can tell someone's having fun writing something. It really makes it stand out.
Yeah, and just a reminder to everyone, like, we're not, even though we will have an official kind of best something or other, we've not decided on the entire categories yet, because we make them up every single time we do a book, but everybody will be joint first winner, which effectively means that you can go to your local newspaper and radio stations and say, I'm first place. You don't need to put the word joint in, and then you'll get some PR. The brand gets some PR. The whole book gets some PR, and that means it, you know, the whole concept going right back to the very beginning at the London Screenwriters Festival. We thought, well, some people run competitions and they go, here's the winner. And I was like, how can we run a competition or an initiative where there's 50 winners? Because those 50 people can then leverage that little bit of data to really, really help their career. So as we enter this next stage, which is marketing and awareness and to some degree distribution and sales, please do engage as much as you can. Buy books, give them to your in-laws, whether you love them or you hate them. You can choose which one of those it is. And the awards ceremony, all of that's going to be going live very soon. The book, I think, goes live on the 3rd of December. I will verify that and email everybody. But just stay involved and keep writing blogs, keep sharing on Facebook, on X, on Instagram, even on TikTok. Wherever you are, however you can help, it all makes a massive difference. So, thank you very much for listening. Thank you very much if you wrote and contributed to the process. Congratulations if you made it into the final book. If you didn't make it into the final book, don't let that...
Congratulations.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, you wrote something awesome.
Yeah.
Be proud.
There are people in this world who are saying, I will be a successful writer while simultaneously watching Netflix. And you did it. You actually did it. You committed. You submitted with all of the tension and pressure that comes with that. You read other people's work. You fed back on it. You're awesome. You're there. Amazing.
Yeah.
All right, thank you very much, and we'll see you on the red carpet at the awards for Twisted 50.
Thank you.